Hi, my name is William Thayer. I'm talking about the COVID crisis. I'm making a series of videos on the theme that comprehensive testing is what we need to do to overcome the COVID crisis. I have made a previous video on COVID and the CDC's mistake. This is the CDC mistake part 2, so I'm going to go into a specific briefing on April 17th. Now, the COVID crisis, when I started making these tapes on April 5th, it was about 500,000 cases. It is now nearly 1.2 million cases. The deaths were 20,000. Now there's 68,000. Clearly, we need to do things in the best possible manner. So I've made a whole bunch of videos. You can freeze frame this and go back and look at these videos at your leisure. The outline of today's talk is the CDC says 300 million Americans can't be tested, and this is absolutely positively wrong. This was on the April 17th Daily Briefing. They may have said it in other times as well, but this particular briefing, Dr. Birx was the first one to say that. Admiral Giroir, who is also an MD, said it repeatedly. Okay, so I'm going to address that and show that that is absolutely wrong. The second thing is what we got to do in anything, any approach, comprehensive testing or the CDC approach, is to see how it's working. And so I'm going to look at what results we're getting in the states across the United States and finally summarize. So the CDC elite, and I do not mean this sarcastically at all, they are truly the elite. If you're looking at the best, for the best doctors in the country, these are them: Dr. Fauci, Dr. Birx, and Dr. Giroir, who is also Admiral Giroir of the Public Health Service. If you look at their resumes, absolutely stellar, off the charts. So I'm not criticizing them as individuals, particularly in medicine, but I am going to definitely criticize their testing philosophy. They are experts, but they are experts only in medicine. We've got a number of things that are affected by the CDC's testing philosophy. Okay, medicine is part of it. Machines in mass production. When you say you can't test 300 million Americans, you're getting into what machines can do and what mass production can or cannot do. Their expertise in that is zero. When it comes to our economy, Dr. Fauci has said, I only speak for the medical part. I don't speak about the economy. And the economy is in great pain. I think their expertise in that, again, is zero. And of course, that's not their area, but what they're doing affects the economy. So I'm not criticizing them personally, but I am definitely criticizing their testing approach. And it's really the CDC testing approach. They're the best in the country, but not when it comes to mass production or the economy. So this is the particular briefing. If you go back and look at this briefing on April 17th, you'll see that they said repeatedly, you can't test 300 million Americans, which is the opposite of comprehensive testing. Well, my goal would be to test 300 million Americans, and we got 330, but let's just say 300 million in 3 days or 100 million a day. I'm just doing that to make the numbers simple. And again, we've got many test machines, but the Abbott ID now is a very good test machine for antigen testing. Okay, we can also do antibody testing, but I'm not going to mention that in this particular talk. Why test 100 million people a day? Well, these are the questions. I've got 4 questions that you should really answer. Why test 100 million people? CDC says you don't have to do it. Okay? How many test machines would be required to test 100 million people? And how much would it cost? And can we mass produce these machines? That's really what I'm going to address in this talk. So why test 100 million people a day? Okay, the idea is the more people you test, the more people you can find out who are sick and then isolate them. Okay, the CDC strategy is to just test a relatively small number of people and lock down 100% of the population. Comprehensive testing would test 100% of the people and lock down 0.3% or 3%, whatever that number is, who are sick. Okay, so it's a totally different approach. They want to lock down 100% of the population. I want to test 100% of the population. Okay? Difference. So the real key is CDC does not believe comprehensive testing is possible. and I'm going to show them, I hope they look at this tape, which is doubtful, that it is possible. The Abbott test machine, remember there's many test machines, but I'm just going to use one. It can do 5 tests an hour, 100 tests a day, really 120, but we'll say 100 tests a day. If you tested 100 million people with 100 tests per day, you would need 1 million test machines. That's the first question I ask. Well, how much would it cost? Pretty simple. 1 million test machines times whatever they cost. I've got the Wall Street Journal article on the right. The price is $4,500 each. So this $4.5 billion. When you did mass production, I'm sure you'd cut the cost in half. But Congress just passed a bill which had $25 billion in it for testing. So we've got the money. This is just a portion of that. Build the machines. It's so simple. So can we mass produce them? That's the next thing. Okay, we got the money, we got the machine design, but can we mass produce them? Well, we had a similar sort of crisis around April 1st with ventilators. We weren't going to have enough ventilators for New York. They needed 30,000 or 60,000, whatever. The country didn't have them. We just had boutique little manufacturers because there wasn't a big market for ventilators. They might be producing 1,000 a year or something like that. Well, then you got the big boys of manufacturing in there. Ford, GM, GE, and Tesla did it on their own. Okay, and they ramped up a production from 1,000 a year to 200,000 in 2 months or something like that. Okay, the most impressive of these, I think, is Tesla. They weren't asked to do mass production, but they came up with their own ventilator design, starting from scratch. In about 5 days, they did this and produced their own ventilators. Okay, and there's the YouTube video on that, the second bullet. Abbott is a boutique manufacturer of test machines. They're only producing 1,000 machines a week. I'm sure they're working as hard as they can, but this is totally inadequate. What you need to do is bring in the big boys of production again and start ramping this up to 100,000 the first week, 200,000, 400,000. Get 1 million of these. You can do this in 4 to 6 weeks. The Abbott, how complicated is that compared to a ventilator? I'm going to guess it has 100 parts. Okay, ventilators are very complicated. They've got 700 parts, and it's a much more complex design. We are producing 200,000 ventilators equivalently on the basis of parts. That's 1.4 million Abbotts. Okay, so I mean, if we can do it for ventilators, we can do it for Abbott test machines or other test machines. So Ford, GM, Tesla, GE, Lockheed, Boeing, Raytheon, we've got so many talented manufacturing companies easily produce 1 million Abbotts. And what is the production line for an Abbott? It's 100 parts. You'd probably have it on a workbench or 2 workbenches. That's a production line. It's a small deal. In my work experience, once I was responsible for a product that was about the size of the Abbott. It was actually more complex and had to survive in a very hostile environment. And the production facility was the size of a large living room with a bunch of workbenches. Okay, I am familiar with small production lines. So can we test 300 million Americans? And the answer is we can test 300 million Americans. Okay, and why would you test 100 million? To isolate the 0.3% who are sick, or 3% or 5%, whoever is sick, isolate them so the other people can go back to work. How many test machines would be required? 1 million. What would the cost be? $4.5 billion. Can we mass produce? We've got the greatest mass production facilities in the world, the greatest companies. Absolutely, yes, we can do this. So the challenge is this: can we put, 1 and 1 together and get 2? We've got the machine design. We've got the money. Okay, can we put the 2 together and make 1 million Abbotts? We need a lot of production companies and a lot of production lines. Now, if we look back in World War II, this was Ford doing not ventilators, but they were doing B-24 bombers. So I think they can do test machines too. And this is Willow Run. It was famous because they would be able to produce a B-24, which had 1 million parts, not 100 parts, but 1 million parts. They produced one of these every hour, 24 hours a day. So can we do it? Yes, we can. And here's just 2020 mass production. We're not doing B-24s, but we're doing cars. We produce 1 million cars a month. Okay, that's way more than 1 million Abbott test machines, easily. So can we do it? We can do it. Now, the real key for any plan is to look and see, hey, how are we doing? So let's look at what's happening here. This is what the CDC wants to see. It wants to see states with decreasing number of COVID cases, and then you keep easing up the restrictions and go down. Okay, so here are probably the best 4 states in the United States. The name of the state is pretty small. I realize it's hard to read, but up there at the upper left, I've got an arrow pointed. That is Hawaii. It's down to 1 case as of May 1st. So pretty soon they're going to be COVID-free in Hawaii. Alaska, they're down pretty low. They were down to 0 one day, but then they bounced up to 9, but they're going to get down there too. Montana down to 2 cases. Clearly the trend is in Montana's favor. In Idaho, also a state that is going down 20 cases May 1st, but they're going to get down there too. They're in the right trend. That's what you want to see every state doing, but that's not what we're seeing, particularly with our large states. Now, I live in California. I was hoping to see California down. It looked like they were going down, but in fact, we're going up. I don't know what the reason is, but we're slightly on an increasing path. To the upper right is Texas. Texas, again, was another state that looked like it was decreasing, but now it's kind of flattened off. So clearly more testing would help them get a downward trend. Down in the lower left is probably the best of the 4 big states, Florida, and they seem to be on a relatively consistent downward path. Now, they still got a ways to go to get down to being really safe, but they look the best. New York has a downward trend, but it's downward trend at such a high level. They're still getting about almost 5,000 cases a day. So it's gone from really terrible to just really bad. Okay, it's an improvement, but it's still really bad. The problem is all the other states are more or less flat. So if I look at the upper left, Maine, not a large number of cases, but not going anywhere. I mean, not going down. North Dakota actually trending up a little bit. Oregon at the lower left, caseload is low, but it's still there. Okay, it's not going down. In Oklahoma, same thing. If they had testing, they could drive this down to Hawaii level. Now, and when CDC gave their briefing on April 17th, what we had done is this thing really started the middle of March, and it peaked just 2 weeks later. I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal, from about almost nothing to 30,000 cases in 2 weeks. Absolutely unprecedented, okay? And then with the mitigation that was recommended by the CDC, by Dr. Fauci, by Dr. Birx, we managed to flatten it, which was great, okay? The cost is our economy, but we flattened it, okay? And there's no question we flattened it. And on April 17th, I really think that they believed that they were going down, particularly Admiral Giroir, thought that we were coming down to 200,000 cases a month. Clearly, that's not the case. We are looking at, well, we're at a level of 1 million cases a month. So we're not even close to 200,000 cases a month. So what happened is they were looking for this dotted line to happen. It didn't happen. Okay, that's the one on the left. What happened was we stayed at 30,000. We were 30,000 on April 1st, and I think on May 1st we're actually 36,000, bouncing up and down, but we're at that 30,000 level. Now, what I really fear is that we'll continue that way through May, and if we do, our economy is largely going to be shut down. And what's worse is if you've got 30,000 cases a day times 30 days, you're going to have almost another 1 million cases in May. That's why we need comprehensive testing. We need to identify who's sick, get them out, away, and isolated and treated so that the other people don't get sick. This is not working. Now the economy, and the economy, by having this not work, the economy is really where the price is being paid. We've got 30 million Americans unemployed. No one can go to a restaurant. No one can fly in an airline. No one can work at a restaurant. No one can work at an airline. Okay, and the people in those industries surely know this. The reason you can't is because we're not getting these cases down. Okay, the new COVID cases are staying at about 30,000 a day. So is it worth spending $4.5 billion to test every American? God, that should be so obvious. Of course, that's what we want to do. Anybody who's looking at this tape that works in a restaurant or works for an airline or wants to go to a restaurant or wants to fly in air ought to be supporting mass, first more testing, then mass testing, leading to comprehensive testing. Again, what we're doing is we're following the testing philosophy of the CDC. They're good in medicine, but when it comes to machines and mass productions, they're a zero. When it comes to our economy, they're a zero. So, summarizing, we can test 300 million Americans, and we probably got to get there. Maybe if we tested 200 million, we might get there, but we've got to test an awful lot more people. Not 4 million a month is just not going to cut it. Okay? It'll be a gradual testing to get there. Today's Sunday. I mean, I would love to have enough test machines to do it on Monday, but it's obviously going to take 4 to 6 weeks if the decision is made to really do mass production, just like with ventilators. Okay, so we should reject the testing philosophy of sample testing. Might be good for the regular flu, but it's not good for COVID. Okay, and I'm going to be talking about testing in how we do testing and what their testing is more like in my next video. What we need critically is we need more production lines for the Abbott test machine and other test machines. And if it's antibody tests, also for them, we need more mass production. I'm going to do a future video on how to do mass testing once we start getting the mass production. Thank you very much for your attention and stay healthy.